to our SIG, and our first of the month. And I'm going to shake things up a little bit today. I'm going to just divert into a couple of light-hearted diversions. But the first of which is that you know, I get these cool T-shirts whenever I get my checkup with the aliens every year, and just had mine this week. So they gave me a new T-shirt. This is the theme for this year. They did insist that I wore a mask, but other than that, it was all routine, and got my T-shirt for the year. So I'm good. The second thing I want to tell you about is, again, completely unrelated to woodwork, and we'll be ready to cue those pictures in just a moment. Anytime you're ready. Is one of the privileges of my life is that I'm married to a retired veterinarian. And although she's not in practice anymore, one of the things that we do every now and again is she volunteers with an organization that rescues Siberian foxes, among other things, from fur farms in Russia. And they're in basically the primitive canid education business. So they have a number quite a number of foxes, actually, and they have some New Guinea singing dogs and a wolf who I met yesterday. And we went out. What we did was we went up there and to take some blood on this guy. And this guy he's a puppy. He's a year old. Very friendly guy. He's about 95% wolf, and we were taking blood for him to go off to a study in Princeton where they're going to get his gene sequence and find out, you know, which sort of variety of grey wolf he is, as it were. And so we went up there, and we met this guy who's a really nice guy, but he is a wild animal, so you have to be a little careful. You can't let his head get too close to you and so on. So let's move to the next picture. So one of the other creatures that they work with is this is a puppy Siberian, or a kit Siberian fox. Came direct from Russia, was rescued from a fur farm, and they're actually an Arctic red fox. But because of the fur farming thing, they pick on the mutations with the different colors, you know, with white being a favorite color. And so they breed these guys specifically for fox farming. These guys are rescued from that. And the organization is trying to educate people about these primitive dogs who are just not the kind of canid that you can have in your home. You know, you will never be able to house train them. You'll never be able to make them safe with children and stuff, or completely safe with children, unsupervised. But they're really neat little guys, and they have some very specific adaptations for the Arctic, which I won't go into right now. But let's move on to the next picture, and you can see a few more of them. Okay, so this is a small group of, you might imagine they're all being offered treats, which is why they're sitting so nicely. But these are kits again, all part of the same group of 9 that were just rescued a couple months ago from Russia. And they're really neat little creatures. And one of the things, because they're obviously they can't have a huge amount of space, so and being wild, they can't be really kept inside the home. These guys have to, they have some specially made quarters basically for them. But one of the things that David, one of the founders of the organization, has done to entertain these guys and keep them busy is let's go on to this video, which the guy on the left here is going to be in this next one. This is oops, hold on. Yeah, hang on. What it is it's an exercise wheel basically for these guys along the lines of a treadmill. And I thought that not so much for the hand tool project, but maybe in the future it would be an interesting thing for our public service build things to do, because when I show you, I'll tell you a little bit more about why I think it might be fun. Excuse us here. We've got minor technical issues. Will be solved shortly. So,
hey, Paul.
yes, Frank.
I signed in like a minute or two late, and I've been
Yeah,
watching what seems to be an episode of All Things Wild and Wonderful.
there you
Is
go.
this the hand tool SIG?
Yes, it most certainly is, but I'm just creating some diversion.
Okay.
Because this is, as I said, I was talking with David, who he built this wheel for his for his for these foxes. And as you can see, this guy quite enjoys walking in it. But what he wants to do is build a wolf-sized wheel. Want to do a build on it, Travis? Did you see the picture of the wolf?
I am in. Yes. We need a giant wheel though. Woo.
Yeah, I didn't mention it to David, but yeah, I was thinking in my mind, how big would one for a 150-pound wolf be? So anyway, just that was just a little fun diversion. So let's get to onto the meat of the thing. Okay, so
Wait, Paul, I'm sorry. Just because that wheel seemed to be a MDF CNC fabricated project, and because you have a bunch of hand tools people here, one of the things you could consider is a group build around some things for a nonprofit like this, and we could actually go from meeting on just a Zoom event to actually participating, getting to know each other, using hand tools and doing all sorts of things. I'm only tossing it out there, but I mean, getting together and building stuff is so much fun. And if there was a need, this could be an interesting project. So I just throw it out there for something to be considered. That's all.
right, yeah, yes, we could have it'd be a hybrid of different people from different disciplines, if you like, within woodworking. You know, so.
Or a straight out hand tool project. I wasn't trying to say anything about Lou Adzima's passion for CNC. I was just trying to say that it is a natural extension of people getting together around this passion for hand tools, that we might also then get together around using those hand tools to accomplish something good. And it's fun as a group of people to become friends, to learn from one another, to teach one another. And your example there just sort of prompted that thought. I'll now be quiet and step away, but I just wanted to plant that thought, not only with you, but with everybody else who happens to be on this Zoom.
Absolutely, yes, yes, that was my.
Step away is a good idea.
Sorry? What did you say?
Step away is a good idea.
I'm not sure that. Okay. So, okay, let's move on to the things I want to talk about today. So the other thing I really want to talk about is this, you know, which kind of leads on a little bit from what Travis was talking about, was this meeting that we have. I think partly through my, you know, we set this up entirely in on Zoom because of the COVID thing, and it has really served an excellent purpose in bringing us together. And now we're, you know, I think we can start to mingle together in person and maybe do some, you know, some of these things. But what I've noticed is that I have fallen into this trap of basically making our meeting into my classroom lecture about something. And that's all well and good, but I think we need to shake it up a little bit and get some more involvement. So, you know, Travis and I had a little discussion the other day, and we're going to do a couple of things. The first thing I think is I would like to go to doing this meeting once a month, because at the present, there's quite a lot of preparation, and I need a little time to sort of step back and to see if we can shake it up, shake the structure of this up, so that there's a lot less of me and a lot more of you guys and other people that we would like to bring in. And we've talked about some strategies to do that. So, you know, that's coming up. So the very first thing that I'm going to do, or that we're going to do, is we're going to move to once a month. So it'll be this second Tuesday of the month, every month for the time being. And we will, I keep looking at the screen instead of the camera, sorry. we'll go to that, and that'll give me a little time to see if we can arrange something that's a bit more interesting than just me standing here and talking and demonstrating, because you know, that's all well and good, but you know, I've given, I don't know, you know, how many times I've spoken about sharpening in one form or another in this class, in this meeting. And you know, it's just one of those things. It can be cyclic, but you know, there are other ways to go with that. I think there's more interesting things for you guys to do with the meeting. So you know, any of you that would like to get involved in this, if you like, new format, which I'll put out something about once it crystallizes a bit, and it may take a while to crystallize. But the first move will be to move to once a month, and that'll free me up some time to try and reach out and just do a little networking and see if we can shake this up and make it more interesting. So that's the plan for the future. So I'm going to try and today I'm going to just talk about a couple of different things, and probably not go all that long today. But there's something that we woodworkers get to deal with a lot, is little planes. And under the current circumstances, I don't know if you've tried to buy a plane online recently, but if you were a new woodworker trying to buy a plane from a current manufacturer at the moment, it can be challenging, especially if you want to buy from, you know, someone like Lee Nielsen up in Maine there. They are, just by virtue of the COVID thing, and this is true for many other manufacturers as well, they've had to, although they continue to produce, they've had to reduce the amount of people that they have in the machine shop because of COVID, and so they are not able to offer their usual full range of product available. So what's happened is that on eBay, you could, something that sells, Lee Nielsen sells but can't sell you now for $350, are going for $700 and $800 because people are so desperate for them. So it's really nice to have a good, well-made modern plane, but you don't need to have it. There are things you can do with something like this, which you can pick up for not a lot, you know. And there are just millions of old Stanley number 4s out there. Not so much on the West Coast, but if you go to any one of the currently dormant tool swap meets, you will find loads of these around, and you can pick them up for relatively little money, and you can turn them up and make them into a really nice plane. But what they are is this is the Bailey plane. Before the invention of the Bailey plane, you had the wooden plane. It does have a chip breaker, and it had a massive tapered blade here and a massive chip breaker here. Oh, I got some chips in there, so that needs a little tuning up. And the whole thing is just really, really, really solid. And back in the days when steel was, you know, expensive and it was a lot of manual labor involved in producing steel, these were expensive pieces. This was the most expensive part of your plane. The rest of it you could make as a woodworker. You could make one of these relatively easily. So what happened was a gentleman called Leonard Bailey came up with this design, and it has a number of advantages over the wooden. I'm trying to get it in a picture. There we go. Over the wooden plane. It has an adjustable frog, which means that it enables you to cut a wider range of shavings, basically, with ease. You can move the blade back and forth is another feature. The frog is here, and I'll show you the frog in a moment. So you move the blade back and forth, and it has, instead of a wooden wedge, it has a, I've forgotten the name of it, cap iron, is it? Anyway, you got this little piece, and I've got to put this down to take it out. And then you have pretty much, well, you have a couple of things. This is the frog. which you've probably all seen before, and it's adjustable by loosening these two screws and then moving the adjustment with this screw on the back here. You can move the frog back and forth, which enables you to go from a fairly coarse cut to getting if your blade is set up right, to getting a super fine cut within a short distance of time, because you can move the blade up and down, which is moved by this lever here, and you can move the blade side to side, which is done by this lateral adjustment lever here. So but the real advantage, apart from the moving frog, the real advantage to the manufacturer of the cast iron plane was they could make a blade, because this is tool steel, it's not just a piece of cast iron. They could make a blade that is much thinner, and by using the cap iron to tension that blade, they could stop the edge of the blade from moving too much when planing. The real bugaboo of planes is that if you don't get it set up so that this leading edge, this cutting edge, doesn't move too much, it can move very easily, and if it moves too much, it'll chatter, which gives you nasty little scars as you plane stuff. So, and one of those factors is the fact that you have a much thinner, or not much, but you have a fairly thin blade here and a fairly thin chip breaker here, and it's the kind of spring tension of the steel that actually gives you this ability. This is a spring tensioned item, and it gives you the ability to use the plane. But these older planes work really well, but they can get a little chattery. So the answer, excuse me, in today's world, if you want to, if you don't want to spend $800 on a new plane, is take your old plane, your old number 4, and get a thicker blade for it. This particular one came from Hock Tools, Ron Hock up in Fort Bragg, but you can also get them from Veritas and a couple of other different people. You look for basically a replacement blade for a number 4 Stanley plane, and just check that it's right for your plane. Anyway, what you have is you have a substantially thicker blade or iron, and then
Paul, is there a small concave gap in between the chip breaker and the blade here as well? It doesn't look like there's a tiny, yeah, okay, so it's still there providing that tension, but in a less dramatic way. Yeah,
absolutely, okay. Yeah. The advantages of getting this are that with the thicker steel, the reason I was looking puzzled at it is because I've got it set up with the cap iron in the place where the blade should be. But you get this thicker steel on both the cap iron and the blade. You can just replace the blade, and because of the quality of the steel, Ron Hock and Veritas and so on are using very, very nice steels today that really retain an edge nicely, and they sharpen up nicely. So you as I say, you don't have to buy. It costs about $90 to buy the 2 of them together. And if you're happy with your number 4, keep using it. But if you're just wanting to do something to your tool that will improve the performance, this really will. Especially, I can't demonstrate it because it takes a little while to set it up, and I haven't actually tuned this blade for it yet. But especially for getting really thin shavings, there's a few things you can do. When you put this blade in, by the way, you want to move the frog a little. Usually, I thought it would be forwards, but it's not. It's actually a little backwards. I thought it would be backwards. But it's not on this plane. I have to move it forwards a little bit because I think the tension of the cap iron brings that other blade a little further back. But anyway, so you adjust the frog until you can get yourself a reasonable gap between the blade and the front here, and the front of the mouth here. You do at the same time take a look at the mouth and look for any little chips. as I'm looking at this, if I were tuning this up, I would reflatten the blade at the moment, because I actually ran over the tip of a screw on a piece of wood that I didn't know had a piece of screw in it, and put a couple of gouges in there. So I got to regrind that. But if you were tuning it up, you would reflatten this, and then you would take a little file and just make sure that this is a nice clean edge here. And there are a couple of other tune-up things you can do to it. But
Hey, Paul,
yes,
can you summarize again what the benefit is of this new blade system over the old? Is it the fact that, well, first off, are the factors that make it better the thicker steel and the better steel? And what does it again get you? A more steady blade edge so you don't get chatter? I'm just trying to net out so I can understand exactly what the blade upgrade is due to and what it would benefit us.
Right. Okay. Well, the thing about chatter is that if your blade is not supported, this is one reason why, for example, once you don't usually you begin to lose strength in the steel if you go further than about 25% on your bevel angle here. But if you don't have sufficient support for this very edge piece here, it moves around. And it will move, inevitably, it will move somewhat as it cuts through the wood. But what you're trying to do is reduce that movement as much as possible, so it's making as clean a line as it cuts through. If it's got a very sharp blade, which is, having the blade be really sharp is another thing that reduces the chatter. I'm not showing you this. That reduces the chatter. This thicker blade supports that edge not moving by just being thicker steel, and so having more steel to back it up. And then this thicker cap iron does the same thing. But that chatter, I don't know if you've encountered it. I certainly encountered it a lot when I started woodworking. But it's when you're planing, and if your plane's working really nicely, let me step back so you can see. If your plane's working really nicely, you can just feel the smoothness as it goes through. But if it's chattering, you're going to feel something. It's just not going to feel as smooth as it should do. It may even feel like you're juddering along like that. And there's sometimes it's due to the grain, but more often than not, it's due to not having the blade quite set up in the right orientation. And there was a reason why why they used to have these things, because these really thick blades, because the wood itself that it was mounted in will move. So the thicker the blade, the greater the reduction in the movement there. Does that help somewhat?
It does.
And then of course he is using this. To be honest, this old steel is just beautiful. I love the cut that it gives you, and it really comes up nicely. But these guys, people like Ron Hawk and Veritas, they're making using some really nice steels. I think this is A1. No, it's A2. It's O1 so this is an air-cooled steel. So this is nothing particularly fancy, but what he does do is he treats it cryogenically as well. So he basically dip the tip in nitrogen, and that changes the crystalline structure and helps retain sharpness somehow. I believe he does that to these, and certainly Lee Nielsen do that to their new blades. But so that's the advantage. The advantage of the thin blade was really to the manufacturer. Of course, it also means that you spent less work sharpening the blade, because you had a smaller bevel here. And in some cases, Stanley laminated their blades. This is not a laminated blade, but before the Second World War, they would laminate using a combination of Sheffield and Swedish steel, and that helped improve the quality. But they don't do that in today's blades. And most of your manufacturers today, if you look at it, I meant to get one out of the closet, but if you look at any Lee Nielsen plane today, you'll find that the blade is substantially thicker than any one of them, even though they're copies of the same design. You buy a Lee Nielsen #4, it's going to have a blade that's more like this thickness.
Paul, how close to the cutting edge is the support blade, the back blade? I mean, the whatever you call that second piece.
It's called a chip breaker, and I'm looking for my screwdriver. The reason I have this in reverse orientation is because it enables me to transport it safely without worrying about getting nicks in the blade. So I undo that. Sorry, we've got a technical issue. We good? Great. Sorry about that. So, by the way, when I bought this blade, I had to do what you do with all new blades, which is to flatten the back and then put an edge on it. So this was already hollow ground, so I did clean up this bevel and then I put a micro bevel on it. But yes, this is the chip breaker, and this is the iron. And the way it works is basically the finer the shaving you want to take, the closer to the edge. Is my picture good? No. The closer to the edge you want to take this chip breaker. When I took hand tool joinery, the teacher said basically a good guide is the thickness of a fingernail. So you're talking less than 1/16 of an inch. If you read Ron Hock's material, I think Ron says bring that as close as you possibly can to the edge. And the closer you get to here, the finer the shavings you can take. It does definitely make a difference to the shaving. So, but you know, as a good norm for general purpose use, probably a little less than 1/16. So say about. Can you see that? Is it focused?
Yes.
So not much. And what it does is when the blade cuts the wood, the chip or the shaving that's coming off actually gets broken by that chip breaker, and that enables it's broken off in little bits, and that helps to guard against things like tear out and so on, and enables the plane to work smoothly because the shaving gets nicely cleared there and up into the body of the plane where it's supposed to be. So you usually want to set it, as I say, pretty close. You know, you start setting it back like this, and it's not going to do very good as the chip breaker. And the other thing it is doing is, of course, it's supporting that edge. So the closer to that edge, again, that you get it, the less it shatters, which is, again, is very good for thin shavings because your blade moves less. So it's going to waver less, and you can get a nice clean shaving. So it's really not a vitally necessary improvement for most of us, but I must admit I was suffering from, I've been trying to get a bronze #4 for some time from that manufacturer in Maine, because, you know, I'm only just a few tools away from being a really good woodworker.
Always.
But I've been wanting one for a while, so I sent off. I looked at this, and I've read about this and heard about putting a thicker blade in makes a substantial improvement in performance, and it certainly does. I'm not going to spend the time tuning it up today because I don't want to bore you, but it gives, you know, that thicker blade, that lack of chatter, gives you a smoother, nicer cut, and you can go a lot thinner if you want to tune it up for smoothing. So, any questions about that, gentlemen?
So you're saying that all hand planing is not accompanied by persistent, never-ending chatter?
It's always a possibility. There are a number of factors.
I didn't know it was ever smooth.
And now we're on the chatter. Let me chatter a bit about it. So another possibility for chatter is our frog. If the frog is not secure, it's held in place by these 2 screws, and then the adjustment is done moving the frog like this. If you don't tighten these 2 screws up enough, then you can encounter problems. And the other thing that you do is when you're tuning a plane up, you take the frog out and you use grinding paste to make sure that hang on, I'll show you. I think I've shown them before, but no harm in re-show it here. This is why you should just take your plane to pieces every now and again, because mine's full of shavings. So hang on. So the frog only actually contacts the sole or the bottom of the plane, the body of the plane, at a couple of points. One is, or a few points. These 4 points down here and these 4 points here, and they're different on different designs of plane. But what you want is that those meeting points should be flat against each other. So what you do is you put old-fashioned. Am I showing? No, I'm not. There we go. Those meeting
you hold
points.
it up. Thank you.
where they go in here. Those need to be flat to each other. So old-fashioned valve grinding paste works really well. There are other techniques, but you just put the paste in there and you grind this back. You take all the restraints like screws out, and you push it back and forth. And so what happens then is, because those surfaces are flat, you reduce any chatter in the actual frog itself. And then the position of the frog, I don't know if you can see, but there we go. The position of the frog in terms of back and forth is critical as well, depending on the blade. Again, you need to have support. If the frog is too far forward, then the blade is sitting in midair. It needs a little support from back here as well. So, there's all sorts of factors involved in chatter. And when I first, this was a plane I got in the 1980s, my first ever plane, and I didn't use it for long time, until the last couple of years, really, because I didn't think it was much of a plane. But with the combination of tuning it up really nicely and putting that new blade, it's turning into a pretty mean machine. And this one, I tell you, it really is from the 1980s. I've replaced the front handle with a wooden tote that I'm going to clean up, but there's a wooden handle. But this one is plastic. It looks like wood. I thought it was wood for the first 30 years, but it's actually plastic. So I'm going to make a new one for that, because I just find wood feels nicer. But this, why is it called? That's a good question, because everything else seems. Yes, I really don't know. Everything else on a plane seems to be somehow anatomically connected. We've got mouths and souls.
Could you repeat the question, please?
The question was, why is it called a frog?
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to research that one. I've been meaning to, but now I've been asked the question by someone else. I'm going to look it up again. But everything else is kind of anatomical. You've got the toe, you've got the heel, you have the mouth.
Actually, Paul, it just occurred to me, it has a frog in its throat, if that's the mouth.
There you go. Frog in the throat. That's exactly it. All right, nice one. I like it. Yes, that's a good answer. Thank you. I'll use that.
A few words about flattening the sole.
But, that's wonderful. So,
actually, was there a question out there?
Sorry?
Somebody had a question.
Yeah, about
Yes.
flattening the sole. I mean, I've got hours and hours trying on sandpaper, and I never seem to be able to get it perfectly flat.
Yes.
Matter of fact, it's way off. You have any pearls you could say about that?
What are you putting the sandpaper on?
Glass.
Glass. How thick is the glass?
Oh, I have no idea.
Approximate. Is it like real window
3/8?
glass? Or
3/8 maybe? I don't know.
3/8. So it's a solid piece of glass, and you're absolutely sure it's flat.
Well, no, I wouldn't know how to do that, but I've also used that stone, the granite stone that we have in the shop. I've used that too.
Yes, that's very flat. And if you secure your sandpaper on that. The other question I've got for you is, when you flatten it, are you doing it like this with the blade out?
No,
Or
I
are you
take the
doing
blade
it with
off.
the
I
blade
take
in?
the blade's off.
You take the blade off.
Yeah.
Okay, that could very well be the reason. The reason that that I think it might be that is because when you flatten a plane, you need it to be in the same working situation as it would be if it were working. So what you do is you put the blade in and you either dial it back, or in the case of some planes, you have different slots for different, depths of blade there. But you put the blade in and you put the cap iron in and you tension it up. So let me get this in place. I've got it upside down. That's one reason why it's not going in properly. So you tension it in place. So it's, to all intents and purposes, ready to work. And you then dial this back, the blade back, till it's way back behind the mouth, right? So we'll dial this baby back. And it'll still get some crap on it, but what you don't want to do is do anything to the blade. So you take that back into the body of the thing. But now you look at this, one of the other things about the Bailey is that it held a nice shape because it was in tension. And so if you flatten your plane without the blade in place, and then you tension it up, you're in effect putting a curve on the bottom of the blade here. And it's very, very, very slight. So you want to check that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So yes, if you don't do that, then what you're doing is you create a flat surface and then you bend it. So you always want it to be in tension, and that is true also with wooden planes. You want the blade to be in the plane and set in, more, but not ready to cut when you flatten your plane, because it needs
Paul,
to.
I also noticed on the throat, that's not flat, is it?
What, here?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
There,
If you
yeah,
could see it,
that
it
looks
would
like it's
really
not
help.
flat.
Yeah.
That's just like mine. Yeah.
I think that well, I think this discoloration here, I think, is actually a little bit of pitch from the wood. But yeah, I'd use this a bit. It might need flattening. This is a working plane. I don't flatten it every day. But the other thing that what I find very good for flattening, and this is something I'm usually at home. And again, this goes back to a new product that we're putting into the shop. This is a diamond stone with 300 grit. It happens to be about the same length as a plane. So you can flatten it on that, because that diamond stone is very, very flat. So you can flatten it on this, and that's quite aggressive as well. But the other thing to watch out for is just like when you're sharpening a blade, make sure that your pressure is nice and even as you behave as if you were planing when you're putting it back and forth. Don't put too much emphasis on the back. You've got to have even pressure on the front and back. And the critical parts to be flat. If you look at many planes, if you're looking on eBay and you see a plane that says a number 4C after it, it means it's going to have a corrugated bottom. So everything behind the mouth is going to have a corrugated bottom here. That reduces the friction and doesn't matter so much to the flatness. The critical parts that need to be flat are the front, this area here. This has to be flat all the way across the blade, the front here. So you want that is, after all, when you think about it, you put that down on the wood before the blade engages with the wood. This is all the flatness you get. So you want this to be really, really flat. And what happens is then that flatness slightly compresses the wood, and then the blade cuts it. And if there's a little hollow back behind here, doesn't matter. If it's just a tiny trace hollow, stuff back here doesn't matter. It's nice if you can get it to be flat across this point, and this point. Will give you a usable plane, but you really do want this front edge to be flat. But
Paul, how is that?
Yes.
Where's the corrugation that you were talking about? Is it like the internal structure, or is it actually externally visible on the sole? Or
it's externally visible. It is basically grooves down the length of the plane. And just like Japanese chisels have a big hollow behind on the flat side, they put that in there because it's as long as you've got flatness across here, it doesn't matter what's happening in here because you're after the cut, you're just sliding along the wood. It doesn't matter so much as long as everything behind here supports keeping this bit flat here. So
Thank you.
getting especially bigger planes than this to be perfectly flat can be challenging. You know, you can see here, yeah, back here where is this what you were talking about, Ron?
No,
You were talking about
the
up here.
front. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Very similar to mine.
Looking at the angle of that, I think that's because I tend to plane at a slightly off
I don't know.
square
Can you see it?
angle, and
I don't know if
it's
this
that-
camera's on.
Yeah.
Is,
I'm sorry.
is this
Yeah.
camera working?
What's your name so we can
Oh.
see?
Ron, Sandzone.
Ron.
There we go. Now we see you.
Can you see the
you've been
blade?
just text until now.
See, this is where I think I'm having the problem.
Well, back here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, perhaps we could talk about it off camera one day.
Sure.
Oh yeah, if you want to show us. Do you have the plane with you, Ron?
Yeah. Can you see it?
Oh, let's have a look.
Nope.
Yes.
See it right here. I just don't seem to be able to get that flat.
Okay, hang on, Ron.
So in front of the mouth.
Yes, that view. I can't. Is it? Oh, and where's the mouth? Oh, I see. Oh my God. I haven't used one of these for so long. Oh, one more time. There we go, Ron. You're in
Can you see it?
glorious Technicolor. Okay, can you pull this plane back just a smidgen from the screen? Looks like you've got some pretty serious wear on the front of the mouth there. Looking at it. That may be incurable. That's a number 5?
Yeah.
Because what basically, in order to get that flat, you've got to grind off that much metal off the bottom of the plane. You know, you can play around with the file and so on, but it's hard to see on camera. Can you turn it, like put your left hand, push forward a bit to your left hand? There you go. Yeah, it's hard to tell how deep that is, but unless it's flat right at that moment where the blade is close to it, then you're never going to get a good cut and you will get issues there. So it may be possible to grind that down. What grit sandpaper are you using?
Oh man, I've gone all over the place from 320 to 80.
Oh, right. Yes, you should be. The thing about when you're flattening something like that, you obviously use the finest that is possible to do the job. But if you've got a major job like that, you go really, really coarse. You could even go to 60 grit. And the trouble with all that sandpaper is it wears out pretty quickly. So you then spend a lot of time replacing the sandpaper. After the first, I find, and this is just my experience, after the first 5 minutes or so of going back and forth, I'm not talking on camera, after the first 5 minutes or so of going back and forth, I find the sandpaper needs to be replaced. You know, you can feel the difference. And but yeah, that could be frustrating. But you could try persevering, or you could try looking around for another body, but you might hit the same challenges. But when you look to buy a used plane, that's a really critical spot to look at.
That's exactly where I got it. I got it at the swap meet.
Right. Yeah.
But I got the feel that is this worth fixing? I mean, is it gone?
It's really hard to tell without holding it in my hands, which, you know, we could do. We could arrange to, you know, meet here when I'm here anyway. But I would say, you know, get some fresh sandpaper, get the coarsest available, try it a bit more. You could even come in and try our equipment here. But it just depends. If you can, let me give you a rule of thumb. If you look at that, and you can actually see like that it's set back from the sole, then at this point, after you've ground it and the rest of it's flat, then you may want to forget it. But if it looks like you see that discoloration, but you can actually hold a ruler on it and see much, then it might be worth grinding down. The key is put that straight edge on it and see what that drop off is. Because if it's like a little round over, you're never going to hit the right sweet spot on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Give it one more try.
Okay.
And if you wanna just leave it at the shop with my name on it, I'll take it home and look at it and give you a call.
Okay. That's a good idea. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. How we doing time-wise? Okay. I thought I'd have run out of stuff. I'm so glad you guys are asking questions. This is what we're here for. I'm going to just set something aside, and I'm going to show you one more toy that I just made. So I've been reading about traditional saws, the traditional bow saw, and I've been reading that they're really good as a replacement for the coping saw, and that they give you more control and so on. And my thought was, how the hell could something as big as this give me far more control than this little guy, who I use this for cutting out the meat for dovetails and stuff like that. Well, I read about them, and I read a really interesting article that said how well they work. So I sent off for a kit, which was basically, the kit involved the tension wire, the pins that hold the blade, and some blades. That was all that was in the kit. And the rest was up to you as a woodworker to make. So what you do is release the tension a little bit more. You take some hickory or some other really nice straight grained strong wood, perhaps oak would do it, maybe beech. But anyway, you send off along. Actually, you don't even have to send off. If you can make the pins and get the saw blade yourself, you could do all that, and you can go online and just get the plans. But basically, you cut out these pieces. These are the first handles I've ever made on a lathe, which is cool. The wood is hickory. The handles are beech. I had some beech that I kept around for tool making, and hickory. I say hickory. It was actually something. There was some pieces around the shop for a while that were labeled pecan, which is much the same tree as hickory, and that's what it's made out of. But the real joy of this, and let me get my sides correct. There we go. First of all, of course, you can put it in your airline baggage. Nice and slim. You can, take it to pieces and it all fit pretty nicely, which, don't we all travel with our woodworking tools on planes all the time? So once you've made this thing, you put it together, and perhaps I should not put it back together. A little quicker to take apart than it's put together. All right. So the way it works is those all retention wire. By the way, the cord is fishing line, fly fishing line. It's certainly very similar to what I have. And the beauty of this tool is that whereas the coping saw has a little hand tensioning device here, it's kind of tough to use and it's very limited in its tension. And this, depending on the kind of wood that you're cutting and what your personal style is, you can tension it, because what you do, you make this little peg and it twists around and makes this, puts more and more tension in the blade. And you can, of course, the handles ride loose in here. So if you want to, you can set it up with it going any angle you want out of 360 degrees. And it really is, even just using it with one hand on, it's a really nice balanced tool. And with two hands, you have the advantage also that you can take control from different parts of the saw. And this adjusting the tension is really nice. But the advantage to me really is in just the way that it saws. It's just so much easier to work with and so much more controllable in essence. And I know, David, you made one, didn't you, David? Or you are making one? Maybe David isn't here anymore. But anyway, there we go. That's pretty much me. And I'm done with that. So any questions on the saw?
No, but I was curious if that mystery tool, which we saw in Mike McElney's shop, was ever talked about in one of these meetings. I think I missed the last one. So if, Louis, can you allow me to share the screen so I can remind Paul what I'm talking about?
Yeah, did any of you watch do the shop tour with Mike? No? It was on the same day as we had one of these, so you guys.
Yeah, if Louis shows, I have a picture of it that I can show it.
Yes.
Oh, it's in the security menu at the bottom.
All right. Yeah, but yeah, this was a tool that Travis sent me a picture of, and I thought that looks vaguely familiar. It looks like a woodworking tool first. I thought
that tool.
Yeah, there you go. It's got wheels, it's got a big old nail in it, and it's got a handle of some kind. So my initial thought was, I wonder if it's something you would use in a woodyard. And, maybe if you were cutting, 8-inch rip cuts on it, you might go down and use that to quickly mark a line on it. And then it occurred to me that probably is not a very efficient way to do it. And then in a sawmill, you're going to have better ways to do that. So I started, going through my memory banks, and I remembered something from when I was a youth. But before we do any of you guys have any idea what this might be?
I think it might be a brick pointing tool.
Bingo!
Oh my
You're
goodness!
absolutely right on in the groove, as it were.
But pointing at what?
Well,
how does it work, Lou?
It trims the mortars in between the joints to a specific shape. That sharp, pointy thing is wrong. I think it should be a flatter thing, and it just cuts the mortar between the bricks to an even texture or depth.
You're pretty darn close. It is a bricklayer's tool, and it is used in pointing. And yeah, one of the things that you do when you lay brickwork is you've got the mud, as it's called, or muck here, muck in England, between there sets up, and before it sets up, you shape it with either hand pointing tools, or I imagine you could probably use something like this. You could also use something like this. In some brickwork, you have to put little vents in there. Along a course of brickwork, every 6 or 7 bricks, you have to leave a joint between the bricks open to allow ventilation for cavity walls and stuff like that. But what this is specifically for is removing old pointing. Back in the olden days, before cement was widely available, the mortar that you used for buildings was mostly sand and lime. and that lime would set up into a fairly solid product, but it didn't have the solidity of cement. So you would then point something on the outside of the brickwork that maybe has cement in it and has that weatherproofing ability, because what, you know, lime and sand by itself is really soft. So what this tool is for is taking out those outer layers of pointing. So when you're repointing a building, this is what you use to clean out those grooves between the bricks, and then you repoint with mud. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I totally agree with Paul. And now that he explained it, yes, that is correct.
You must have a background in construction, Lou.
It's fascinating. Thank you, guys. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, and for a whopping $19, you could still buy it on Amazon Prime today. It's called a skateboard wheel or something or other, jointer, something like that. Anyway, so a joint is the bond of cement between the bricks, and the pointing is the action of and the existence of that outer layer or shaping on the joint.
If you buy it on Amazon, does it come with the patina of 100 years of aging?
Absolutely not. This is obviously saleable as an extremely valuable antique.
Okay.
Trace it back to a particular blacksmith in New Haven, Connecticut or something.
Right.
It's funny because it was strange but terribly familiar, and the fact that it came through a woodworking source made me think it had something to do with woodworking. But, I think you know, when in my extreme youth, I worked in the construction business, and specifically used to work as the what was known as a hod carrier. You provided bricks and mud for the bricklayers, so you inevitably learn a little bit about bricklaying by osmosis.
Interesting.
Joint breaker. There you go. Sounds more exciting than it is, doesn't it? And probably out in the West here, probably a rarely seen tool, because I've never seen anyone repairing. The only place I've ever personally repaired pointing in San Diego was on a chimney stack in North Park. And that had that lime mortar that is just, it's so soft. It works great as mortar, but you've got to protect it against the weather. Maybe point the screw the other way. On that one, yeah.
Or maybe it's just maybe it's shown upside down.
Maybe the screw.
Maybe it's shown upside down because the person has no clue what it is or how it's used.
There you go. Marshalltown is the real clue, because they are probably the worldwide known as some of the best bricklaying tools in the world. If a British bricklayer wants a really good one, he buys a Marshalltown. He or she buys a Marshalltown.
Very good, Paul. Very quick.
I think Paul, that nail is in there in the correct position in both cases, because on the wet cement, you'd have the head down to rake it.
Yeah.
Strike it. You'd rake it and then strike it with another round shaped tool.
There you go. Yeah. So you could use.
So you'd use it in both positions then, Lou? Is that what you're saying?
All right.
You're muted. You're still muted, my friend.
Who's muted? Us?
It looks as though you use the flat side to get the depth of the wet cement exactly right when you're finishing off the brick wall. It looks as though that space at the top is about 1/2 an inch or 3/8 of an inch for making the groove and setting it back.
And it looks adjustable as well, so obviously.
Yeah.
But where in the world does anybody find a nail?
Yeah,
I'm
but
kidding.
that's I'm sorry, I lost the screen some way. But yeah, that's correct. Is when the mortar is wet, you use the head of the nail to get it to the depth that you want. Then there's an S, it's not an S shape, but it's a wavy shape tool, that striking tool that smooths it to a round concave surface.
Yeah, it looks like
All
a pretty
all is
good-
correct is when you repoint a house, and my nephew just did this to my former mother's house in Pennsylvania. It was 125 years old, 2 layers of brick, and he did the whole house. It was a 2-story house. It took him
That's a big
almost
job.
a year, to repoint it. But there's nothing else that you can do, because eventually the bricks will fall out of the house.
And of course, in Pennsylvania, it couldn't work 6 months of the year, because if it's freezing, you can't lay up mortar, because it expands and ruins your mortar.
Exactly. Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, it's 11 o'clock, and I thank you guys for checking in. And so the next one will be next month, second Tuesday. I was going to say second Saturday. And I'll put out something in a while, and it'd be great to see some of you guys in the shop with us. And we'll see if we can't shape this up and get it to be a something that benefits you guys.
I'm glad you're going down to once every month. It costs so much money to buy the stuff you recommend.
I accuse him of the same thing, Chris. I say the same thing all the time. He has cost me so much money.
$100, right?
Yeah. Last
Okay.
week I had to buy a honing guide. That cost me
And my
$70.
motions are entirely altruistic. It's
Right.
just-
You get your percentage, I hope.
Oh, well,
Thanks, Paul.
it's funny because you go on these YouTubes, and, I went on one the other day that was specifically about sharpening, and the guy's got like a big poster that says Jet behind him, and he's got other posters for different manufacturers. And I'm thinking, he didn't just get a free poster and stick it up on his wall. So I should maybe, but no, if we got any sponsorship, it would be to benefit the society.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good month.